This event today is part of MCAD's public program series. So outside of exhibitions, we have an immersive education program. And today, we're very honoured to have two of the artists which are part of our exhibition with us. The public program will stretch throughout the whole run of the show, and it responds and is reflexive to not only the concepts which are presented in the show, but also expands on other ideas and how basically all of the work that is presented in MCAD is integrated with wider ideas. So today we have Alfredo and Isabel Aquilizan, who have produced fantastic work, which you can see in the gallery. But before you immerse yourself in what's in our space, we thought it'd be really fantastic to hear from them the origins and inception of the project in Another Country, which the work iteration that you see at the show is its most recent, correct? So these guys are going to be talking to you a little bit about their practice and then explore more how the origins of Project Another Country, all the way up to its current iteration, which you see in the show today. So I think it's fairly informal. I do encourage you to think of questions as we go along, and we'll have time for a Q&A at the end. But for now, I'll hand over to these guys, and please welcome them with a round of applause.
Everyone speaks Tagalog?
Salamat.
Except you! I'm sorry, Chris. You cannot? Okay. Nelly, please translate. Sure. Please talk in Tagalog.
Yeah, we usually start with an image, but we didn't know that we're supposed to. We have a PowerPoint. Anyway, yes, you probably see, we have the work outside that you can, in a way, engage. So the work was actually produced in, it's made in China, literally, and it was shipped here. And then we have to reconstruct the whole thing again. Which I think we like that idea of having a whole city transported to another place. And that tells a lot of things. For example, what's happening now all over the world, right? You have all these new cities coming out. You have all these issues that comes along with it. For example, you have also, new buildings, new houses, new condominiums, but you also have these homeless people around. And this is what we want to talk about, that idea of dislocations. For example, the work itself is being dislocated. It's already what?
And then it has that layer of meaning when, two projects, a previous project, and how it's going to be translated and it's going to move to another place. So our work will usually be engagement in terms of engagement with the site and the space.
Yeah. So, okay.
But also, I'll go back to what Chris was saying in terms of what Project Another Country is. So just put it in context. Just for a bit of background from Alfredo and I left the Philippines with our 5 kids in 2006. And we chose Australia to be our sort of home. But, and from that move, the Project Another Country started. Project Another Country means for us that when you leave home, you don't have a place you call home anymore, but that's for us. And that another country is being in the middle. Even if we go back to Australia, it's kind of like that weird feeling of you're displaced, you belong and yet you don't belong. And we always have global living, we see things in many ways. double ways that sometimes also coming from the Philippines, when we go back home, it's strange. We feel like we're foreigners, and yet we feel that we are very much connected to everything. And the previous things that you see this, but you see it more, like everything magnifies in a way, and then you see things in a different way. So the middle ground for us is that another country.
So when we moved to Australia, that series actually started Project Another Country. This word is actually part. So it's a series of work, different iterations, sometimes same word but different configurations, because it adapts to the place or the site where it is being built. Let me just explain further. Like in this case, for example, it was built in China. It was exhibited and took over the feeling of what Chengdu, where the city that where this exhibition was shown. When we rebuilt it in Manila, it took another shape. Probably exactly the same, but if you look at little details, little things comes with it. And I think that's how our work is all about. It's all about the idea of engagement. You engage with the site, for example. Ano ba yung sinasabi ng site? Ano ba, what is Manila? Ano ba talaga yun? And how are you going to talk about it? And how, if we, the world is going to talk about the place in itself. So, and then it's also an engagement with the material on hand. Like for instance, in this case we have cargo. What does the cargo material tells us in relation to the work? And then we also have the engagement with the exhibition. If you're going to read about the whole exhibition, ano ba yung sinasabi sa atin yan? And that also transforms the work in itself. I mean, the context of the work in itself. And engagement with the site. I mean, the space. When you build something within the space, you engage with that very specific space wherein how does it work visually? How does it inhabit? How does it activate that space? So these are things that are actually very important in terms of how we create our work. And finally, I think the engagement with the audience, just like now, how each and every individual, engage with the work according to your experience, according to your background, or even according to your status or your educational background. So iba-iba, we have different way of engaging, and that actually make the work continuously evolve in the mind of who are actually engaging in the work. So it's not actually us giving you something and this is what you need to understand about the work. But each of you will have your own way of, the personal experience, and you're going to have a conversation with the work itself that goes beyond just the selfie thing. Of course, we can have our pictures taken at work, but then we start actually thinking what the work is all about. What does it tells us, in association with all the works that was part of this part of the illustration. Does that make sense? If you have any question, but if you have any question that you need to clarify,
Can I also just ask from everybody in the back here, okay?
Yeah. Are you all good?
Please speak now because I'm not going to ask again. Yeah? Okay? All right. Thanks, guys.
And please feel free to because we really want it to be just, like kwentuhan. We've never had this, audience, and most especially creating or bringing to the Philippines a work in this scale. Usually this type of work that we do is always in, biennales or, so it's going to be nice if you have something that, because we can just go on and on and on and on and, talk about, good morning, talk about our practice. But again, let us talk about the invisible tsunami, which is, I think, for Alfredo and myself, it's the most, sasabihin ko yung word na precious. This is, this work, our work, basically, can never be, it will not exist if without the help of numerous individuals. So when we did this in China, we had kids of all ages in different schools and engaging and creating and, say, especially do it in China and tell them, can you make a house? Or what is home for you? You can make your baby house. And this is your material. It's cardboard. Easy and sugar. But more than that, cardboard for us is a very important material. When we left the Philippines, ang muna namin gamit is this our relocation box. And but again, using the materials, not just, cardboard or ano ba po. It's a vessel. At sa ating mga Pilipinas, very important. Tinutulugan, becomes a house, becomes what? And here, only here in the Philippines, you have to buy it. In other cities or countries, libre, pinamimigay ka sa'yo, binabato sa'yo.
So you can actually start reading between the lines, for example. You get to read, for example, different factors like economic, political, cultural, whatever, through the work itself. Not just the work, but even just the material itself, which is kind of like interesting. And we assume also that you are familiar with our other works before you attend this talk, and we assume that you already look into what we are actually doing. And we deal basically with materials, because materials in itself becomes part of the meaning of the work. Okay. Let me explain further. Like each and every cardboard, for example, that we use in this work have already that history of travel. Nanggaling na sila somewhere else before someone else took it and put them all together and created a house. Okay, and then from that house, and all the 100 houses that was being created from all these cardboards, done by individuals, we put them all together and create that imagined community, for example, that is imbued with narratives. So each and every house, for example, even sira-sira siya dyan, or a highly designed cardboard house, there's this little narrative that goes with it. So if you put them all together, you start creating those little vignettes. Yung mga maliliit na kwento na yan. Not necessarily alam natin, we know the kwento of that particular kid, but also we have our own experiences. Okay, we create our own stories also by just engaging in the book.
But for us, it's really important to engage with the people that we work with, especially if we come to a community and we start working with them. It's, for us, the most important thing is, you demystify the variety of our stories and individual pursuit, nasa pagkasta lang yan, we kind of like democratize everything. We open it and share the experience of creating and making with everyone. And there's no rule. And Freddie would always say, there's only 2 rules. You have to have fun, and the best part is clean up. Mas lalo pa pagkatrabaho mo mga estudyante.
Well,
So,
I think gone are the days, no, not gone.
hindi
You
mo.
know, we like artworks now are, you know, it should be something that you engage with. Well, you can also use a lot of artists still do those traditional work like doing painting, for example, or whatever, you know, but, you know, now I think it is important to bring back the very, to bring back the, you know, what art is all about. You know, when we talk about what art is all about, it's all about, you know, what we do every day. You know, well, how are we going to connect with our surrounding, for example. As an artist, you know, that responsibility of reflecting what's going on around you. Right? And that's your role as an artist, for example, because you don't have any, you're given that gift, for example, to see things differently and translate it into a visual form for people to start actually looking into something in a different way. Okay naman.
So anyway, beyond all of this, it's those stories that's behind forever created this work totally changed from China. It was built in a place where it used to be an old electronics factory during the Mao Zedong time. So, but then, of course, it got abandoned. So, wala nang nangyayari sa factory. So, we had the exhibition there. So, the work really took the character of that place. So, maybe if you can still Google where that, you will see it if you go to Cosmopolis 1.5, Center of Computing, Mao Zedong Foundation. It's outside. So, you will see where the place is. So, parang that's the context of all the pipes and direction of those lines. But then when we moved it here, of course, yung bugbong na karton, di ba? Yung mga ginawa ng mga nag-volunteer, gumawa ng puno, gumawa. But, you know, what people create on that specific place talks about that place. What's familiar. So, nagbabago yung trabaho. But nag-emerge na, someone said yesterday or the other day, sabi, oh my God, so this word is Chinoy. Chinoy na. So, it's amazing, like, you know, you remember those, I like that. I like Chinoy. Chinoy, di ba? So, stories, ay mga kwento pa.
I think it's
It's nice.
This is a conversation.
Yeah. But, yeah, and it's an opportunity for us. I would like to, if my son is here, we have 5 kids, and they're all artists. I always say unfortunately, no, fortunately. And one of them is here, based here, and he's the one, we call our children our hitmans. So if we're starting a project somewhere, so they kind of like to start, and via usually Skype. So when this was built in China, our eldest son Miguel, he was in China already for how many weeks, and he started to put together via Skype. So by our guidance, pero discounted it. So finally, when we got there, so we had to do the final build out. So that's the way we operate at this point in our life, because our art, for us, art and life is not separate. So the everyday, you know, whatever you will see, what the work, our work talks about that. You know, we just reflect, and we're very lucky that we have the ability and that gift to transform things. And sabi ng ibang curators or directors, yung magic daw. Kahit, bigyan kami ng pupong na lakon. Or whatever. We can just make it to something. But without the help of everybody. some of them are here. Nenny, maraming salamat. And the gallery, everyone. No, this work will not be here without everyone's work. And we acknowledge that. And that's also the idea of our work, which is ownership. So we extend that, pag-create to everyone. It's not just us. We're just conductors. It's just like conductors of a symphony, you know.
Yeah, if you
Pag
have any-
tanungin ko na daw kayo, if you have questions, Chris, I don't know.
I have one.
Yeah.
You were mentioning a lot about stories that are shared with you and can also be found in works that are made by your collaborators. So I was wondering if in any of your talks, like I'm sure you also have talks about when you get travel to different galleries, do you share the stories that you probably talk about when you're making all of these works? So that, like, for example, there's a tree, etc. The artist or who collaborated with you would have why he or he made this tree or that element, how he or she shaped it. Do you share those stories also?
Well, I remember. But in most cases, sometimes we just remember who, like for example, a particular object is made by like this 5-year-old kid. Yun lang yung naalala mo, and how he actually is creating it, maybe with his grandfather. And for us, I think that's the most important thing, yung creating a space for people to come together and make something, which is now in our time, nawawala na yun. We don't have that much time already to come together and sit down and slow down, diba? And that's very important, and that's basically that's very basic, that's what art makes you, you slow people down. Okay, you go to a museum, you slow down, look at an artwork, you make something, you slow down, and that's everyone, it's what we need now. And creating a situation wherein we get people to sit down and come together and make something, I think that's for us. When they start talking to each other while making, I think that's for us, the art form in itself. That kind of engagement. In the end, they have this little tree or a house or little houses. But I think what for us, the art form is when you get them, sit down together, which is a beautiful thing.
In the end, we use objects that are mostly ephemeral, so they'll be gone. But what stays in the end, yung memory and the stories. And we sound very nostalgic, but that's how it is.
Well, most of our projects, like large-scale installations like this, these are temporary installations. After the exhibition, it will be deconstructed, babalik uli sa recycling center, and then that's it. And as Isabel said, only the memory of the work remains. Which I think nothing is permanent naman. You make a painting, you make a sculpture, even bronze sculpture, it might last longer, but these are all, comes later on mawawala. Right? Of course, the role of museum is actually to make it, to make the life longer, but in the end, how we engage with the work, I think is the most important. And how it tells us about a particular period in time, or a moment, that moment when that little kid created this little house. I don't know if it answers your question there.
It does. Because yes, that's also one problem of a challenge in a museum, because as you pointed out, the tangible is really paints, etc., even videos are kept, but the stories like that, and the space is not seen by everyone who were not involved in the project. So how do we present it? And thankfully, through talks like yours, you explain the process and what is it, so they get an idea even if we don't have as much documentation
Yeah.
as we would like to, even the methods that we have currently.
Yeah.
I think we're quite happy with this work.
Very happy.
Very happy.
Sleepless nights.
With all the works na one that we create. Of course,
Dapat masaya ka,
you
no?
make it a point that you know, well, basically it's just a conversation between the artist and the materials and the people who are involved in the actual making, but how are you going to translate those conversations into something that can actually touch us when the audience starts engaging with the work, diba? Otherwise, dadaanan mo lang yung painting, or it's just a decoration on the wall, right? But first and foremost, it is you have all these visual languages that comes with it. The vocabulary that the visual vocabulary that you start actually sharing, and people start actually reading. Ang dali. I mean, it's not madali, but you just engage, like why this house or why this little bird hanging in this little stick, for example. What does it tell us?
O yung simbahan sa loob ng sa pambayan.
And then you get to start also making these little stories.
Again,
Next question, please.
Or comment.
For the benefit of the audience, can you, obviously this has been a series of works which all have different visual representations, and so this iteration is of course houses which you engage the Chengdu locals to imagine their dream houses. But previous versions have of course been other items such as planes. How does your research inform the choices you make about the proposal to the community?
As we mentioned, it's like engagement with the site. So we do research. We fly in, for example, and then we start looking into materials that is available within the place. One of the series of work is the satellite projects, in which we started building all these satellite phones all over the world. Like for example, we have it in Mildura, in Victoria, in Australia, in which it's actually the fruit basket of Australia. So they have all these dip tins. Dip tins are actually like parang balde that has butas, and then they put all the grapes, and then they dip it in water para ma-wash yung grapes. Of course, it was used during the olden days. And then we found this like old factory with all this, they're not using it anymore. Of course, everything is mechanical now. So we started using those dip tins as an element to the satellite itself. And then we did one in the desert, and we like the Mango National Park in Australia, in which that's where they found the oldest bone, for example, thousands and thousands of years that nandun siya sa
sabi
desert,
nila
which
first human.
which is actually a dry clay. But anyway, so we use the red clay to create that. In Japan, for example, we did a project with in an island that produced the Eriko dried fish. The Eriko dried fish is what they use to put flavor into those Japanese soup that we usually have. And that little island actually supplies the whole of Japan. There are, I think, like 25 factories. And when we went there, they're in the process of, upgrading those drying tray, and they're throwing all these trays, and then we use that also to clad the sun. So, these are actually different iteration, but actually using the same form. But at the same time, these are social spaces that we want to create for people like you for people to engage. Like people come together. We have all these satellites, for example, for people to sit down under and start looking at, big things and, trying fish trays, and then start contemplating about the history of the site or what does the site tells us. So it's just telling stories using the shape and the material that we use. Cardboard, we've been using it for since years, because we have projects about that idea of Balikbayan boundaries also. So make connections. Why houses? Why it talks about home, for example, in a very simple way. Like what is your dream house, for example. But
In many levels, it speaks about that.
exactly.
So when we did a project, so before we flew here, we were in New Zealand, in Auckland, and we created a work, 1-year project with them, creating little houses. So, but for them it's very significant because ang dami nilang homeless. But these are all islanders, like, Samoans who moved to New Zealand. But the issue now, because of the high costs, yung may pera, bumibili ng maraming property, marami hindi na. So all the ones who cannot afford, ends up in the street.
And these issues are actually happening all over the world. And I think there's also a need to talk about it in many levels. You might engage with a little child, but creating a home, and then we can actually start talking about what home to them. You go to Canada or Vancouver, or you go to Hawaii, you have all these homeless people, but at the same time, like here in the Philippines, you have this building here, building there, but you also have this,
When you go on the 12th floor, you see.
So, yeah, this is, I think, very important to talk about, and we're very lucky that we have a medium to talk about it in a different way, in a visual form, if you like.
We answered that, Rich?
I think actually something that's really important that they mentioned, which relates to the entire show, is the work requires an engagement. So everything that you'll see in the Centre Will Not Hold in the exhibition space requires you to actually engage with it. On the surface, it's a very one-dimensional, with the exception of these guys, but the other work can be interpreted very simply, but actually each one is laced with complex back history, meaning, and I suppose what MCAD is trying to achieve is for visitors to actually engage with the work that they come and see. It's not, as they described earlier, a photo opportunity or something that you can pass in and out of. This is a holistic engagement which I think is immensely beneficial and laced with such history. And these histories are not Filipino, they can be from all over the planet, which is what the artists in this show are projecting. They're responding to sites like these guys that they have visited, experienced, and then have responded to using, in these guys' case, the local community around. So, is there any other questions for these guys?
This has been a privilege for you.
Yes.
Or you use that?
During the process of creating your installation, did you face any struggles?
It's always a struggle, you work, but that's part of it. It's again, you'll be given a situation, but you have to respond to that accordingly, and so that issues around it. And the struggle is, it's good, because it's a challenge. It's a challenge for you to think, it's a chance for you to be creative, to go around things, but in the end, you have to make it work. And alam mo, I felt so homesick now being back here and working with all these people. It's like, anyway, so nice. Kasi parang, you're home again. And you've not sites with fellow Filipinos who are born willing to be there for you until the very end.
Yeah, talking about struggles. Yeah, as we all, creating not just this scale, but any art form, it's always a struggle. It's always a journey. It's always, and the nice thing about it is, you always come up something that surprises you, for example. And that's why we probably the reason why we keep on doing this, because we don't know what will come out. Yeah, we might talk about, stories, narratives, context, whatever, but it's, if you probably start contemplating on the work, it's also like a visual contemplation, how you work with, you go back to the basic, like you work with the color, you work with the texture, you work with the, how are you going to put them all together, how will it work, visually, and it's not easy, it's a struggle, but those are the things actually that we all want to achieve, creating that kind of harmony, right? In every level. Maybe we do it in the artwork, but it actually reflects what we want to achieve with our surrounding. You go out, you step out, you have all these chaos, you have all this construction, jeeps and taxis, and you have, how are we going to put everything in harmony for us to, and that's why we create works like artwork. For us to have some kind of, okay, finish the work. Any question?
Just a question. So what kind of engagement do you hope to get, since a lot of the works that you create are very large scale works, and most of the time you can't really see each individual piece that's in the work. Let's say, for example, the Montini art project that we're not doing, they're both very high, so you can't really see the artworks. And like the one outside is very huge also, and a large stack of clothes that you can also back.
Doing your research.
Something. So what kind of engagement do you hope to have with the audience by creating works that monumental in size? I mean, aside from it being placed like in a museum or in a biennale, so what's kind of engagement to achieve with that?
I think it's just probably the effect that it creates in like in each and every individual. Kasi like scale, we talk about scale. Yeah, if you look at the work, it's all about scale. You have this huge piece, for example, but at the same time, you also play with those little houses and little birds. So it's also a play of perception, how we actually engage with our surroundings, for example. Like if you probably, maybe you might need to stay longer for you to be able to see all those little things. It's hard, but that's why we create this for us to have a more to sharpen probably how we see things, how we perceive things. If you notice also, if you are in the center, we did the reverse perspective. Kasi pag perspective, pag nandito ka, mas malaki yung harap mo, right? But if you are very, like, ano manonotice nyo is the reverse. So we have these small things, it gets bigger. So we also play with perceptions. How we perceive things, how we see things. And when you start looking into that, that's when you actually get the audience engaged in different levels. You know, not just the narratives, but also like, for example, scale, the proportion. Like for example, in perception. And of course, as we all know, art is selective, so we have different way of looking at things.
Any final questions? Okay, well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the guys. Please, everybody.
We'll be around and we will, ang hirap sa ganito klaseng trabaho. We have to learn how to disattach ourselves from our work because we always we put so much in it, in creating. And we have to enjoy looking at it while it's still there. And while, maybe the next time, baka sisirain na. And I will go to the recycling, bibili na dyan ng per kilo. So,
Yeah, before Chris wrapped this, I'd like to get this opportunity to
thank everyone.
like all this stuff, Chris,
Marianne, thank you for your Nelly. Thank you very much for your endless.
and for all of you who,
I'll mention Ian, John, everyone, to Kuya Pabs, Kuya Alan, and the volunteers, Tonya.
There's a huge, just
So
so
much.
there's a large team behind
Yeah.
most exhibitions, but this one particularly, and just as the work is obviously community oriented, there was a real community feel for the production of this work.
Yeah.
These guys have worked tirelessly for weeks, so I'm very grateful and turning up at 11 a.m. today to talk to you guys about it. But on that note, we actually do have another artist talk this afternoon at 2 p.m. with Ichon Kim, who is the video work that you see in the show. Of course, you're all welcome to attend, and we hope to see you. And please, one big thank you to the
So, if you have not gone to see the work yet, because you just came in for the talk, we'd like to invite you to go to the galleries now and view the works. Thank you.